Here we go. We'll get started. Hello, fellow wargamers and history buffs. This is a special recording. It was supposed to be live stream, but YouTube's decided to not be cooperative. Um, and we are going to be having a debrief of the group that was playing the La Bataille de Moscowa game. The game itself got started, I believe, in April of 2024. So this is the longest running sort of multiplayer vassal game that I've done in excess of a year. And we've got 7 players that were involved with it. And so I thought what would be fun for us to do is to talk to the 2 army commanders, kind of find out what the general plan was for their approach to this battle, and then to talk to the various and sundry folks that were involved with different elements of the French army and the Russian army to kind of find out what their task was or what their objective was, what was working, what wasn't working, and then kind of what they learned not only from the tactics of the time period, but also from their maybe ideas or opinions of the Regs 30 rules, which were the first being used for a number of them. And so that's kind of what we're going to go. So I thought I'd start off first with our illustrious French commander. David was playing Napoleon. And so, David, if you'd like to share what your kind of overall battle plan was, that would be terrific.
Sure. I have a map up. Did you see that, Eric?
I did. I've just hit on the share stream button, so it's now up there. And yeah, that's a nice looking map where
Okay,
you've
well,
got
this,
everything. It looks like you've turned everything on its side. So compared to how we usually have things, um, with the vassal module itself, it's kind of been tipped sideways, which is nice. So tell us what you got and what we're looking at.
all right. Well, the orientation was due to the screen formatting, so that it
Right.
was easier to look at the whole thing on its side here. And it's still not that far off, but this was our initial planning map and plan for the battle.
Right.
Um, the left flank, we had the Fourth Corps and part of the First Corps. In the center, we had Junot's Eighth Corps and Ney's Third Corps. On the right, we had the rest of the First Corps. We had 2 cavalry corps over here, one behind and another on the left, with the guard reserve behind. The Fifth Corps, Poniatowski, was be coming on at a later date. It
Right.
wasn't on the board initially. So the initial plan was basically to hold on the left with the Fourth Corps, send the extra First Corps divisions back to the First Corps so that they could have a maximum force
Mm-hmm.
and basically do our main assault over on the right. The um, so that was the plan.
Okay.
The this I found out at shortly after we started the game that this was actually the plan that um, the First Corps commander, Vu, wanted to uh, execute, but Napoleon nixed.
Right.
So we were kind of doing an alternative history of what it in type thing. So the we proceeded to do that, and we got the Fourth Cav and the First Cav and the First Corps went to the right,
Right.
up through here, and up through here, and that's when things started to go awry.
All right. So that was the overall plan. That's great. Let's see now. Let's check in with Brennan, who was the sort of overall army commander, the Kutuzov of our group. So, Brennan, do you want to kind of share with us what the Russian plan was?
Sure. So, La Bataille de Moscow or Borodino is one of the largest of the La Bataille games. It was the largest single day battle of the entire 19th century. So the armies are huge. And we had lifted some of the formal restrictions in order to give all the players a chance to play really at the core level, maneuvering whole cores around the map instead of, like, if you leave the historical restrictions in place, it ends up being more of a divisional scale game. So we wanted to really give players the opportunity to maneuver these big units and watch their interactions and so on, which was, that's a really fun way to play the game. As the Russians, we looked really hard at the Russian army. The Russian army has advantages and disadvantages. It's fundamentally based around artillery, very strong, very heavy artillery, which when it's used well and brought into crossfires and dominating positions can work very well defensively. But the artillery has to be used together with a very, very careful look at the terrain. So it has very good quality infantry, which is able to resist when it's attacked directly. So we looked really hard at the terrain of the battlefield in order to set up carefully planned artillery positions. And then we spent the early part of the game moving the artillery into the planned positions, lining up the zones of fire and the crossfires. And then basically from then on, the game developed as a pretty standard sort of Russian defense. So the artillery consists of large positional batteries and then lighter core level artillery or division level artillery with the lighter batteries. And you need to use these in a really thoughtful mix so that you can get fire superiority in the important places. And you have to use the terrain to protect you from very large French grand battery fire. So one of the things that we did early on, this is a standard analysis of the game, is that the Bagratian flèches, which were historically the very first position to be attacked, they're actually basically untenable in game terms. And so we abandoned them early in order to get more time to move into positions that we really thought were going to be defensible. And then after that, we stood strong with the batteries as planned and let the French march into our crossfires.
Okay.
Which we did.
Mission accomplished, as they say. Okay, well, good. And so I thought what we could do now is just kind of go down the line and chat with the French players, and we'll basically start from the west and move our way over to the east. So, Robert, you were playing Eugene's corps and the cavalry that was out there. You want to tell us a little bit about what your objective was, and then kind of how things developed and what you learned in the process.
Sure. So I brought Eugene in, and the goal was to take Borodino and occupy the heights there to the left of it, and then screen outwards with light cavalry, and then just hold.
Okay.
And so that was sort of the goal. And I did take the church in Borodino. That was the high point.
Right.
And then uh, and so I sort of started positioning things, and then Brennan came around with the Cossacks, lots of cavalry. He brought on Tolstoy and some reserve artillery, and just did a brilliant combined arms clinic, which destroyed most of my infantry, a lot of my artillery, and just pushed pushed me all the way back. And so we eventually started a fight in terrain that was really not advantageous for it was more advantageous for me, but we got caught sort of in the rough there, right below where it says light cavalry.
Right.
And so we were slowly getting pushed back. And by the time I was finished playing, um, Brennan had that choice of whether he wanted to go over the top with, because we had set up a grand battery there. We had the old guard sitting there. And so he was kind of working on deciding what he was going to do in that area. And then a little bit where, like the first core area there, he had a lot of cavalry, which he could have made some decisions about and charging the Italians there.
Right. Okay.
So that's pretty much how things went. I learned a heck of a lot because I had never played these rules before. And Brennan was really great teaching a lot of the basics and um, learning through the school of hard knocks, I guess, so to speak.
Yes, yes, that is definitely true. Um, I know that you've played 5th edition with me before, and for years you and I played 3rd edition all the way basically from the 1980s all the way up through the early 2000s. What's your general feel for the regs? Did you kind of like some of the elements of it? Were there some things that you weren't quite so happy about, or
Yeah, so I grew to appreciate the cavalry rules. The infantry assault rules with the 900 different steps you have to go through. I I wasn't really a huge fan of that.
okay?
Too much. Otherwise, I think it's a really great game system. It has a lot more chrome than third or fifth edition does, and yeah, it's like the total antithesis of the Premier Edition rules.
Yes, yes, I think that is a fair assessment. Good, good, good. All right. Anything else you want to add before we move on to Michael?
No, I just have to say I really enjoyed playing the game.
Cool. All right, Michael, your turn. Why don't you?
Okay, so go ahead, Eric.
Yeah. So just let us know what where you were at and what you were doing there.
Sure. So, for those who are watching on YouTube, I had versus a side like what Robert had. I had a couple different commands that were spread across the board. I had Poniatowski and his 5th Corps over there on the right side. I had Junot's Westphalian Corps, which was that 4, David?
8. This one
Eight.
down here.
Okay, it
The
was
8th
8.
Corps.
All right. Yeah. So, and then I had command on the right side of Robert's wing over there on the left. It was Saint Alphonse and some cav
Okay.
within that. And so I got a good mix across the left wing, the right wing, and the center wing spread out. It was largely some of the allied nations with the Poles and the Westies. And so I got to face off against really all 3 of our Russian players. So, which I learned pretty quickly, they all have 3 different playing styles. So, and I needed to kind of operate within that. So,
Right.
good learning lesson for me. And just to kind of sum up what happened to my various different commands. There was a bit of a on the left side with Saint Alphonse and the cavalry. There was a bit of a back and forth, really, with Brennan. He was mostly focused on Robert and his corps of Italians and everything that had been positioned on that. Is what Robert was just talking about. In the middle, it was more of a slugfest between Mitch and I, with the Russians in the middle, because the Grand Battery was there and the Great Redoubt was there, and he had about 5,000 artillery counters that were there, and they cut me to pieces horribly. Every once in a while, Mitch would toy with me and come out and sortie forth some guys, and eventually the Westies just got chewed up. They were not the strongest of cores in the first place, and I misplayed the timing on a support effort that was me moving forward, and I got chewed up in the middle because of that. So, and eventually the Westies completely collapsed because of it. Um, my precious, precious Westies. And on the right side with Poniatowski, um, it was I got to experience firsthand Eric's elan and excellence at using skirmishers and North Koreans. Very frustrating, very frustrating because
Yeah.
Eric is really good at maximizing all of the really annoying tendencies that skirmishers can do
Hmm.
in La Bataille, and he's really good at it. It really hampered me and slowed me down, and it was marvelous to behold, but as a player opposing him, it was super frustrating. So my hats off to you, Eric, in
Thank
in
you.
in that space. So all of that said, a lot of fun. I had, for those who are out in YouTube land, I have some limited experience with Lava Tide before, and it's specific to the Regs 30. I am a big historical miniatures guy, and I'm a big fan of the period and whatnot. But all of that to say, I really like Regs 30 because of the historicity that it brings in. You get a lot of realistic battles and some of the nuance tactically of what was going on with it. And I love the representation within the rules. And as a historical miniatures player, I really dig the alignment that it had that Regs 30 has with that, and all of that to say, yeah, I learned. I thought I had a pretty good handle, rusty, but a pretty good handle on Regs 30, and I learned I learned so much more in playing this, and very much was a beneficiary of the patience of the group and just the willingness to sit down and talk through rules and explain things and et cetera, et cetera. And it's just almost like the ultimate learning experience.
Cool. Cool. Well, thank you. Anything else at this moment in time? We'll have a chance to maybe recap. Um, but do you think you hit all the salient points you needed to?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Thank you.
Cool. All right. Moving over towards the center. This is David. So you want to tell us the commands that you had?
Sure. I had the Nay's third corps, and I had the Young Guard and the Guard Cavalry.
Okay.
And I basically set up a grand battery there, a little forward to the right of the brush there in the center. It did a pretty good job on some things. I ended up
I'll
taking out
say, yeah.
a few uh, Russian guns and stuff like that. Um, but it was too little, too late. So on that. Um, Again, I pushed forward uh, fairly aggressively with both, and they met. I met Mitch's cores on my left, and Eric's on my right, and I second Michael on the tenacity of Eric on the defense in this thing. So, and the and also Mitch and in the on my to my left, his artillery was just a monster all the time, just trying to avoid. Like initially in probably the first few turns of the game, he took out three of our big heavy batteries
Yeah.
on the left that had been assigned to the fourth corps, and just made mincemeat out of them. So
Yeah, I think he had a couple of like 65s and 66s that just,
That
yeah,
was
that just
impressive.
basically boom, the battery goes explosion. So, yep, that's tough when it happens. You did the same thing to me, but it was like to a light gun, so we didn't weep so much. But yeah, when the 11 pounder or 12 pounders get blown away, that is pretty tough. Tell me a little bit about your kind of what went right for you, and kind of what went wrong, and then your opinion on Regs 30.
the well, what went wrong was probably a little bit of the initial commands that I get. Initially, I sent these 2 heavy cavalry divisions over to the right to accompany the First Corps, and all we actually probably would have needed there would be maybe the light division from 1 or 2 of those, or the light division from the First Corps over on that side, basically to deal with the Cossacks. Those cavalry corps would have been better coming up this center and being support there. So we tried to get them back over there to the center, and it was just too slow moving through that brush for
Right.
them. And so that was probably I would say, the biggest strategic mistake we did that. We also, having the Russians have the ability to have corps level activations 3 per turn did a number on us. I think we might have, if they had been limited to the division level activations, then I think there would have been a little more back and forth, and we would have been able to concentrate on some areas before. But we were actually the ones that were concentrated on, and it led to our downfall. We made it as far as, well, I don't know how to pronounce the name of this village here.
Semenyoskoy.
Yes, there, and along this area here, but Mitch's corps is coming up over on my left, and the corps, Eric's corps is coming in on the right, just halted us and basically put both my corps on levels and stuff. So.
Yeah. No. Yeah, it's tough, and it just trying to get stuff kind of through there. And as you mentioned, the terrain is not good heavy cavalry terrain over there in the brush. So, all right. Thanks, David. Let's head over to Rick. Rick, why don't you share your observations? You were out on the east end of the battlefield. Whose command did you have, or commands?
Yeah, I had First Corps, Morant, and some light cav.
Okay.
And my goal was to take Morant and his glorious cavalry and sweep the Cossacks off the field.
You mean Marat?
Getting them, Marat, sweep the Cossacks off the field. Morant.
He was one of your division.
And then after sweeping him off the field, to then push down through the middle there, and then deal with anything lingering there as First Corps clears that area. And then opening that up so that Fifth Corps can follow through, and as well as follow the cab through and clean up anything that the cab doesn't deal with as they run into the brush and the woods, sort of thing.
Right. Okay.
So that was generally at a high level. I think, obviously, as David alluded to, one of the big things I learned about the game is really knowing the terrain, understanding the terrain and the impact on the different type of units in the game. Had I known that, I think, to David's point, wouldn't have sent the heavy cav over there. Light cav would have been enough to engage and harass the Cossacks. With that, I probably also would have had a division going up the road into that open area that Fifth Corps ended up going through.
Right.
Just to start engaging stuff so that Fifth Corps can get up there and replace that division. Because it just allowed you guys to set up everything uncontested and just wait for us at that point.
Yep.
And then I think, I think just having an awareness of the terrain was the biggest thing for me learning. And knowing, like, we're being funneled through here, and if you allow the guys to set up, that funnel's going to be brutal, and it was.
Yes.
But other than that, I think generally I thought First Corps did okay. I think for me, the chip post system makes it kind of difficult in Regs 30 to really coordinate multiple division attacks. But I was moving as a core, so I don't really have an excuse there. But sometimes I wish my, chit would be pulled sooner.
Yeah, I think we
Which
had
kind
a
of messed
couple
up
of
some of my exploits.
yeah, I think we had a couple of times where the Russians got lucky and got their chit first, and I was able to plug some of the holes that you'd pushed through. So yeah, that the order that the chit comes in can have an impact on things. So well, cool.
Yeah,
Anything
yeah.
else?
Well, I think in watching on the left, it reiterated, looking at your opponent's force in depth, because cavalry can move so fast, and just I tend to look just at the front line, the immediate problem, and then get caught when cavalry comes sweeping in there, hitting stuff that I didn't expect.
Right.
And again, I think that goes back to being aware of, all the units in play, what their capability is, and looking just past that front line, I think is pretty critical to La Bataille. And then lastly, the cavalry rules in Regs 30. I love them. They're my favorite. And other than that, I tend to lean towards 5th edition just because it's faster.
Yeah, I think that's something you and I had discussed in some of those breakout rooms when we were doing the game. Cool. Anything else?
Nah, I'll just complain about Napoleon on the side.
All right.
Because it's not my fault.
Let's jump over to the Russian command. Let's go out to the west first. So, Brennan, could you share with us a little bit of what was going on with you? I've got the vassal module up, so if anybody wants to ping things there, you can. We've got things up as they were at the end of the last turn. So, Brennan, go ahead and take it away. Tell us what you had cooking out over there.
Sure. So my job was overall planning from the role of Kutuzov, and then in actual operational work, I was holding the western side, which had two different corps. It had the fourth corps, which was engaged from the beginning because it was opposite the French fourth corps. And got into action early. And then the second corps, which is a deep Russian reserve unit. So we looked really carefully at how to bring all of the Russian reserve artillery forward, especially the second corps. The second corps, starting in deep reserve, actually has a very strong artillery force with a lot of heavy batteries, heavy position batteries, and plenty of the medium batteries as well. So we began kedging and later artillery commanding the second corps artillery up forward in order to mass artillery onto that wing. A fairly standard French opening in this game is to have Eugene's fourth corps, which Robert talked about, drive into Borodino village and then across farther. And that's kind of what happened. But because it's a known standard opening, we had prepared basically a crescent, an arc of position batteries. And so that attack came into an artillery kill sack pretty early. So that's a pretty known standard opening in this game. Then the next thing we were looking for was, okay, what happens next? Will the French infantry come forward? And if it does come forward, will it come forward as a whole coordinated corps, or will it come forward one division at a time? And the French, because of their deployment, had Eugene's fourth corps was so far out of reach of Napoleon that it was out of corps command range. And so the divisions had to get committed piecemeal across the stream, the Voyna stream there. And because they were coming piecemeal, then the natural Russian response is, rather than responding to one division with one division of your own, is to try to overpower it, flip the game. So we intentionally then responded with a whole corps.
And so the French divisions came over one at a time, and we were able to. So the Russian Fourth Corps over there has 2 infantry divisions, some good artillery, and since we saw there was going to be a piecemeal drive, we decided to try to overwhelm it, and we reinforced the Fourth Corps with a lot of the army assets, several additional battalions, several heavy dragoon regiments, and army level horse artillery. So what we ended up with was single French divisions, like the 13th Division, the 14th Division, coming across the stream one at a time. And then we were able to bring them into, in effect, a triangular engagement zone, where a single French division, 10 or 12 battalions, would come across the stream, and then there would be one Russian division, infantry division, angled to its left and another one angled to its right, with the French moving into the triangle in the middle and under pressure by cavalry. So as a result, we were able to kind of overwhelm one at a time each of those French infantry divisions, and then leave the Fourth Corps in effect eroded pretty early, having had heavy counter battery work against it planned, and then on a responsive basis being able to bring a corps level response against individual divisions. So that achieving of local superiority is a really important part of high level grand tactical play in La Bataille. You want to look for, okay, where is there one division that I can get a corps or 2 corps against? So that was an awful lot of the thinking out on the west. And then having won the early fights back and forth around Borodino village, then the opportunity arose to then, in effect, in fencing terms, having parried the attack, to riposte. And so since we were going to then drive, we then decided to commit a concentration of force. So rather than driving equal against equal, we brought in all the Cossacks, the right-wing Cossacks, and also 2 very high-quality cavalry corps. The first and second cavalry corps both were joined together with the Fourth Corps, fourth, and the artillery. So now we had really an augmented, empowered, enhanced corps, and it was able to drive onto the wing strongly throughout the game. So in effect, we were watching for opportunity, maybe looking a little deeper, Rick, as you said, beyond the front line, looking at what the French had there, and being able to overwhelm them. Then as the French attack began to break down, the French began to reinforce. There are a lot of victory point locations on that hilltop there, west of Borodino, a lot of French fortifications with a lot of terrain victory points. So the French built up a big hedgehog force there in a defensive posture, which included a very large number of 12-pound artillery guns, and also eventually the Old Guard infantry and the cavalry that Michael brought. So looking at that, even the enhanced corps wasn't able to tackle that hedgehog of the very powerful guns and the high-quality troops. But clearly that flanking riposte had drawn off a lot of high-quality French resources off the center and off the right. So we couldn't really go after them, but by pressing against them while staying in shelter, we were able to hold that French resource off the main line, which was of benefit to the battle plan. So that's kind of what the western side looked like. Then the Second Corps, which had been in deep reserve, towards the mid-game, towards noon or 1 p.m., as it became clear that in the central action, Junot's corps was going to buckle. It wasn't big enough or strong enough to handle encountering the Russian guards and artillery in the center, that was going to be a breakthrough zone. So the Second Corps, which had been our primary deep reserve, began moving forward behind Mitch's Russian Guard Corps, looking to make the mid to late game breakthrough.
Cool. And I know any observations of how the game worked with Regs 30?
So all the La Bataille rules systems produce games that have a lot of authentic Napoleonic action. In Premier, it's very, very simplified. You basically see the infantry and the cavalry running around. So that's an oversimplified version, but still fun and quick to play. The third edition, which doesn't have the command rules, has less chrome. The fifth edition, which does have the command rules, has less chrome, but it doesn't have, by and large, the alternating randomized chit pulls. The randomized chit pulls produce really interesting turn dynamics. Like it's very random, and there's lots of chances to take advantage of those dynamic flip flops, which makes it really fun and exciting to play. Also, the Regs 30 cavalry rules have a lot of space for really dynamic use of cavalry. The fifth edition cavalry rules show pretty well the heavy blows back and forth between the major cavalry formations, but in Regs 30, both because of the mixed chitting and because the cavalry charges happen immediately for each cavalry group, there are so many dynamic combinations you can come up with. Cavalry to the flanks, or infantry pinning with assaults, preventing squares or preventing opportunity fire, and the cavalry hustling through gaps. So the Regs 30 cavalry are really, really fun and dynamic to play with.
Cool. All right, moving on over. Mitch, you were there in the center. What all did you have, and what was your objectives there?
I had the pleasure of playing, what would you call the major generals, army or corps leaders, Lavrov and Dokhturov, early in the game. So most of my action was in and around the Great Redoubt and the defense of Borodino village. Early on in the game, my principal corps activation was Dokhturov. And so that meant, I think it was like, 7th and, a couple different divisions. And so I had a big fight in the middle over Borodino village. My units took a fair bit of damage in and around there early on in the game. And then once we sort of cleared the village out with the help of Brennan's support, we pulled them back to form our sort of rear guard, if you will, to come back and fill holes as need be. As it sort of turned out, they ended up never really getting back re-engaged, because then after that, Lavrov was the man in charge, and he's got a fellow named Kantakuzin, which is a cool cat. He's a cool cat because he's sort of like, I don't want to describe him. He's sort of like this. He's got it all. He's got command of some guns. He's got super great infantry that he can use. He's got skirmishers. He can command a few guns, and you add a few leaders and so forth. And he can kind of do it all. And so having that sort of do-it-all guy allows for a lot of flexibility when that core activation comes on the board. Also, with the center wing and the guard under Lavrov, I had access to some really great cavalry as well, which was great to play with. And so from time to time, I had that. So it was nice to have all the different forces. After Borodino village got cleared out, and then I put that's when we sort of advanced, because we had the Russian guard way in the back. It's like, kind of wanted to get them up to the front. But Brennan's idea was, no, you kind of hold that back in the reserve, and you kind of wait to see where it's going to be needed. And we kind of came upon it would be good to sort of put it into Borodino village. I can't remember how many times Brennan had to talk me out of just launching an attack out of Borodino village, which with the guard, which is what I wanted to do. And we kind of played through some of them, which is great to have Brennan on your side, because there were several scenarios where we sort of said, he said, okay, let's see how that plays out. And I'd play it out, he would do some stuff, and it was just an absolute nightmare. And so I was like, okay, maybe a little bit premature. I was almost on the verge of springing my own attack, and then just because of the way the chit pull is, Michael launched his right at me. I was like, oh my God. And it was a thing of beauty to see when Michael brought the squares up and he filled the plain in front of the Great Redoubt. It was absolutely beautiful. And then the crossfire from the cannons came in and just made it an absolute mess. Learned a lot about how to it's the lessons learned here are applicable to almost every game that I play, and particularly the Goss and the Battle for Normandy type things. And it's it's just so many of the sort of maxims that Napoleon talks about is that, the concentration of your force, and you don't ever fight even. You always fight in a way that you have a severe advantage, not a big advantage, but if you just fight where it's just totally unfair is the way to crush your opponent. And so I've kind of learned that in some of these other systems is, hey, let's start massing my artillery that I'm not using over here in this sector. Let's get it attached to the core, move it over, and start, blasting Germans in that game. But here it was blasting the French. In terms of the Regs 30, it's kind of like the only system I kind of really want to play because of the realism. It has a massive rule set that doesn't read real well. Probably read it 6 times, put it on a PDF reader and listen to it. But it's only playing for, gosh, we've been playing over a year for a 1-day battle. I mean, that gives you the time frame of what it takes to commit to something like this. Yeah, the unknown certainty of when your chit's going to be pulled completely changes and requires that you be sort of present in what's going on in the game, and you just can't necessarily stick to a plan dogmatically. At the same time, sort of reading some of the historical literature, and Brennan's been great about sort of pointing some of that in my direction, is that what worked then works in this system. And I suppose that's where I find the greatest beauty of it all, is that it works realistically. Does it have a few quirks, and would I change something here and there? You bet. But what game do we play that we wouldn't want to do that anyway? So at least that's my experience. I think with you playing with great people like we're playing here, it makes for a really great use of my time and definitely my gaming time. So I really appreciate the opportunity to play. It draws you into the history too, right? These people, these names, you start looking up there. I started looking up their pictures, reading a little bit about them, and getting a sense of who particularly these characters are that I probably wouldn't have gotten any other way. I learned a ton playing with Brennan. He's a master. If you get the chance to play him, your game will improve. I'll tell you that, and your ego will take a big hit at the same time. I was playing pretty good, I thought, at Auerstadt, and then he just utterly annihilated me in one turn. I was like, "Oh, that was fun." Game over.
Yes. Oh, very good. All right. Well, great. Thanks, Mitch. So I'll share a little bit what was going on, kind of what my job was. So when we saw this huge mass of cavalry coming over onto the Utitsa side of the battlefield, and we saw that the French were kedging the 2 other divisions from Eugene's side of the battlefield over to Davout, it was pretty obvious that that's where the main thrust of the French attack was going to come. However, the terrain over there is absolutely dreadful for heavy cavalry, and it's not very good for maneuvering artillery and everything else. So my goal was to just delay the French for as long as humanly possible. So that way, what we were trying to develop against Eugene, we'd have time to see something happen before things would switch over to my side, and we would be sucking up a bunch of command points for me trying to counter what the French might be doing over on the Russian left wing. So using the Cossacks, using my skirmishers, deploying the troops in the brush and swamps and things like that was all part of that delaying process. And, I don't think I could have pulled it off without the Cossacks. I mean, they are really uncatchable. And they're just, the perfect for this job. And the terrain totally favors them. And so I had a lot of fun. There was a tactic that I had developed when I was playing. Oh gosh, it was Hassenhausen, which is the Marshall Enterprises update to Auerstadt, where I was using light cavalry in behind my infantry in skirmish order to delay the advancing infantry, particularly with the Prussians there. They move so slowly, and when they're in line, they're moving even more slowly. So they could hardly even get up to engage my infantry line. And so I decided, well, I'm going to try that same tactic here, because while the French can move faster, the brush and everything else is going to cost them. And then with Regs 30, the closer you are when you launch your assault, the more penalties you have on your roll to close. So I used that tactic. I had the I had the skirmishers in front for a while, and then I had them behind the infantry for a while. So there was all just buying time for the Russians. And then when the French finally came in, I found that on the whole, those grenadiers were able to dish out a lot of damage to the French. They had a better firearm multiplier than the French infantry did. So I was typically, while the French might be firing at 1-to-1, I was shooting at 1.5-to-1. And so over time, I was dinging away at the French more often than not, and then having grand batteries and stuff like that. So I was able to basically hold off, I don't know, about 4 French divisions with 2 Russian divisions. And then when the Young Guard came in, I was able to basically to halt them with like a division and a half. And the other key thing that I learned from the Regs 30 is to keep people back in reserve. So I always made sure I had a couple of battalions in reserve that I could then plug holes with or do a counterattack. Or more likely, not so much do a counterattack, because then if you are successful, you advance and you're disordered, and then you can't make a morale check if you're next to the other guy. So I just come up, form a new line, blow the stuffing out of whoever's there, and then in the subsequent turn advance. So I think I only occasionally launched any assaults. I found that just using firepower was much more effective than coming up and doing an assault, which is significantly different than 5th edition, where in 5th edition, making an assault tends to favor the person who's launching the attack, while in Regs 30, being on the defense is actually better, and the attacker is at a disadvantage. So that was something that I sort of learned about Regs 30. I do like some of the cavalry things. I certainly missed some of those when I was playing Mont Saint Jean this last week at Consim. I'm like, I really would like to be able to, withdraw my cavalry as infantry are coming forward and stuff like that. But no such luck. So that was kind of my job, and I think I did it successfully. The other thing that I did, like particularly with David when the Young Guard came out, was you had so much artillery piled up behind them, and you had cavalry and stuff piled up behind them. So I figured if I had to withdraw, I'd be giving you room to deploy all that stuff. So as soon as they came into Semyonovsky village, I just came down on you with my infantry to basically pin you in place. And then you had this big traffic jam behind you, and you can't shoot through your own units. And so then I was safe from your guns as long as I was engaged with the Guard. And while they were shooting better than my troops were, on the whole, it was a better thing for me to do. And I think I ended up, and I rolled up some horse guns and blew away a whole bunch of increments, and I think took out a chunk of or a number of battalions in the process. But that was my thinking with that, is I can't let you deploy with freedom. I got to come down, and I got to keep you sort of backed up and congested, because I figured if you could break through there, then you'd be able to turn my position that had been holding off the First Corps for several hours, and I'd have to withdraw. And there's not as much good ground until you get way up into the brush, much further to the north. So that was kind of what was going on with me. So, all right. Good.
I thought it would be interesting to share some analysis for next time people play this game about how to play the different sides, if that would be fun.
That would be fine.
So we played as the Russians a fairly traditional Russian defense pattern, which is, relying on the artillery, setting up crossfires with large batteries, and reading the terrain very carefully, so that to the extent it can be that the Russian artillery is sheltered from French counter battery fire, but is able to dish it out. And the game then basically played into our hands because the French took a fairly standard orthodox approach. If you look at the Moscowa game and read your way into the scenario special rules and just let it kind of sink in, it turns out that actually an optimization for the French is to be asymmetrical. Like the Russian army at Borodino in 1812, it's been reorganized from the earlier Russian armies at Eylau or Friedland. And it's been basically reorganized to look like the French did. But the French army had been evolved beyond that from the middle stage of the Napoleonic Wars. And the French army in this game has some unique asymmetrical capabilities if you decide you want to use them. And an asymmetrical use of the French army in this game looks sort of as follows. The number one step in it is to look at the French advantages. And the French advantages are maneuver capability. They get a lot more CPs per turn. It's like 9 compared to 6 on average for the Russians. So there's already a 50% advantage. And then you think about, well, how do we make maximum advantage of the CP capability? And eventually you realize that it's actually to maximize maneuver. It works better for the French to shorten their front and to be willing to maneuver off some of the starting terrain and give up some of their starting locations in order to condense their army so the whole army is within Napoleon and Berthier's command range. Notably, Eugene's Fourth Corps on the west, if it wants to maneuver as a corps, it's a very powerful corps. So that's a good capability. But in order to do that, it has to give up the victory terrain that it starts on and move back to the central army so that it's not maneuvering by division, but it's actually, so then you can get all of Eugene's corps, which has 3 very good quality infantry divisions, sometimes 5 if you keep the Davout divisions there. And it also has a high quality cavalry division built in, plus the Italian Guard, which is a good quality division. So it's actually quite powerful, but you have to be willing to give up that western hilltop and move that whole corps back in with the main army so that it's within Napoleon's range. Or the alternative is to move the whole army, do a left hook instead of a right hook, move the whole army over to Eugene, so that the French are never trying to use that powerful corps on a divisional basis, but they're using 1 CP to get the full corps activated every turn. And then also the French light cavalry, rather than using it on its initiatives, which are okay but not particularly solid like the Russian Cossacks, you actually it ends up being able to be commanded by the main corps CP, by the corps commander. So the first step in making the French into a maneuver strategy is to just tell yourself at the beginning, we're never going to move except by full corps activations. And that means you give up some terrain and then begin to maneuver the army. Another element of an asymmetrical French approach is to look at the artillery forces. When you look carefully, it turns out that the Russians have a large amount of long-range positional batteries. It's the equivalent of the French 12-pounders. The Russians have about 50 or 55 increments of the long-range artillery. The French, oddly, have less long-range artillery. They have about 15 or 18 batteries of the 12-pounders. So they're actually outnumbered by the Russian long-range artillery. But what the French have is a zillion fast-moving, very fast-moving horse artillery batteries. And horse artillery is an asymmetrical capability for the French in Moscowa. Not in any of the other games, but in Moscowa specifically. And the rules actually include an asymmetrical ability. It's like subtly in there, which is that the artillery special ability leaders can not only command batteries, grand batteries for firepower, they're also enabled in Moscowa to maneuver to command any artillery unit within 3 hexes. So what that actually gives you the ability to create are using 2 of the French special artillery leaders, you can create, in effect, Klingon battle cruisers, where you concentrate. The French have like 40 of these fast-moving horse artillery batteries, And you can concentrate 20 batteries to one of the special leaders and 20 batteries to the other. And then you give them additional subordinate leaders so that you're like, you can't fire that many at once under the one commander, but you get subordinate leaders to combine them into batteries. Now you have two highly mobile, lethal horse artillery forces, and losses among those horse artillery are actually fairly cheap because you have a lot of them. And so then what you can do is you can take these two large concentrations of horse artillery, and where Rick was pushing infantry through that brush zone, you can actually push the horse artillery through there. Where Davout's first corps was going, and you can actually lead with the horse artillery. What happens to the horse artillery as a result is, of course, it takes a lot of counter battery fire from the Russian heavies, which are standing back at 10 or 12 hexes back, and they outrange the horse artillery. But there's so much of it that as it presses its way using its high speed to limber, move one hex, unlimber each turn, it takes you 2 hours to push the horse artillery through the brush. Once you've done that while taking some casualties, now the horse artillery is out on the open plain. And by leading with these two groups of very massed horse artillery, it also tends to prevent the use of the Cossacks as a skirmish screen in the brush, because the Cossacks, they can screen in the brush, but they get vaporized by the artillery.
Yep.
So they can't afford to. So that's an asymmetrical advantage for the French, is to combine. You just pull all the horse artillery batteries out of every single corps. There's a lot of it attached to the cav corps. You bring that and you just give it to these two special artillery leaders. Then you use the other two, Napoleon and maybe Sorbier or somebody, to command the French long-range guns. So rather than trying to use the special leaders just for the long-range firepower, you're actually giving them asymmetrical command of these highly mobile firepower groups. And then the other asymmetrical advantage that the French have is Murat and his cavalry command ability. So there's a special rule, a scenario rule, which says that any cavalry corps commander who stacks with Murat is active at all times.
Yes.
What that lets you do is to take the French reserve cavalry. There's 4 powerful heavy cavalry corps. You can combine all 4 cav corps commanders under Murat, and they move as a fist, as a cavalry fist. And the concept there is they're not limited by Napoleon and Berthier's 15 hex command range. Because they're with Murat, they're a fully independent group, and they can go anywhere on the board. So if you break your way forward using the horse artillery groups, heavy horse artillery groups, and then follow them with, of course, some infantry like Davout or Eugène, but you have Murat's cavalry fist there, then after they get past the brush, then they're out in that wide open zone east of the Great Redoubt. They're sort of out of the main artillery coverages that the Russians usually have. And now you have 4 cavalry corps that can act as an independent force. And because of the chip pulls, what you can do is you got 4 corps, you can give 2 command points each turn. And on turn 1, you're activating 1st and 2nd reserve cavalry corps. And their job is to go kill or exhaust the Russian cavalry. So in turn 1, you can use 1st and 2nd cavalry corps, and they just target the cavalry. And then they're completely exhausted and used up. And the next turn, you use the same 2 CP chips to activate the 3rd and 4th corps cavalry corps. So what you get is, and then the 1st and 2nd recover by not moving. So what you get is this cavalry fist that has 2 active heavy cav corps every single turn. The cavalry groups for the Russians and the French are almost exactly the same in strength. So they each have, it's something like say a couple hundred increments worth total. And the increments are, and the combat strengths are, even including the Cossacks and everything, are about equal. But what the French have is that command advantage. They have the mobility advantage of being able to move all 4 cav corps under Murat. And by spending 1 CP, the French get a whole cav corps, which is often 6 or 9 regiments. They have smaller regiments, but more of them. And the Russian cavalry is extremely command expensive to use. Usually you only get 4 regiments per command point. The French are getting 6 or 9 units, so that you're playing to the French asymmetrical advantage by creating that cavalry fifth. So between the use of the massed horse artillery, which it doesn't jump out at you from the way the army is organized on the table, on the organization table, but if you think about what the special rules let you do, you can create those horse artillery sort of Klingon battle cruisers. And then it also doesn't jump out at you that the reserve cav should all be used as a mass. But because Murat has that command ability, you can do it. And when you apply that, you end up with a very asymmetrical force that has breakthrough capability by firepower and then exploitation capability by cavalry. It's a very different approach to the French game in that case. And then the infantry takes almost a secondary role. So that's something to keep in mind coming back as the French.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. Anything
Why didn't you
else?
tell me before the game? Though
Exactly.
I did
You
kind
didn't
of come
ask.
up with some of the same ideas, but not to the extent that you were saying, because I did have that one grouped like horse artillery, which has 6 or 7 or maybe even 8 batteries of it down there under Duro. And we were trying to do the idea, but not all 4 divisions of all 4 corps of the cavalry. We put 2 of them with Murat but again, we sent them too far to the right. Instead, we should have used them more in the center.
The single biggest lesson from Napoleon and from Jomini and from Clausewitz is concentration of force. That is the number one lesson. And so if an idea comes along, hey, maybe we could pull a couple of units together and get a strong-ish force, then you're like, what you want to think about tactically in the La Bataille system is how can we take that initial spark of an idea and absolutely maximize it, turn it up to 11 in Spinal Tap terms, let's concentrate. It's not just some horse artillery, it's all the horse artillery. It's not just 2 heavy cav corps, it's all of them. And what you get are these emergent combat capabilities that didn't exist until you concentrated them. And then you have this asymmetrical power compared to the opponent.
Cool.
Nice.
Any other questions or comments? It looks like we've got, yes, Mitch.
There were 2 special rules that we used that I found a bit distasteful ultimately in the end. We sort of nerfed the ricochet rules by applying a -6 modifier to each hex that the cannonballs rolled through.
Right.
That allows you just to throw skirmishers in front of everything and make everything invulnerable to attack, which was the distaste that I had. The other one was this sort of stacked French artillery thing where you would slap a 2-factor horse artillery on top of the big guns, and then that would just make the big guns unhittable because you always had these little guns on top. And so I felt that those 2 house rolls were ones that I would say didn't meet my expectations of improved gameplay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good.
My thoughts.
Yeah. I tended to agree with, so I think the way the rules are, they had it so that you couldn't stack 2 French batteries together. I'm not sure why they came up with that in the rule system, but that seemed to be something that was built into it when the game was designed and tested and whatnot by Terry Doherty back, over a decade ago now. Well, actually, probably more than a decade ago. So I know that when we played 5th edition, we did allow the French to stack up to 4 increments in a hex, and that's. But yeah, with this one, having it with 3 was a little weird, trying to get the facings and everything else right. So, cool. All right. Any other questions or comments before we wrap things up here?
I just want to say a personal thank you to the whole group. What a chance it's been to all play together. And just a blast.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was a lot of fun. I know that I've been thinking about what game we might play next if we have 7 players. I know that David was probably going to be bowing out on Monday nights. I'll find out where everybody else is on Mondays and see if we can carry on with another game. And I thought maybe we'd switch things up so that way Robert and a few other guys could work with Brennan to get some coaching. And yeah, and just kind of, as we say, everyone's game kind of goes up the more you experience you have, whether you win, lose, or break even. Kind of seeing how things work is how you get better, And Brennan and I are both from the competitive fencing universe, and sometimes my best matches have been the times that I've been, beaten by a superior fencer. They tend to be enjoyable, but then I learn a lot about, okay, this is what was working, and this is what I've got to do, and this is what the other chap was doing. If you're just, beating people that are weaker than you, you don't really have to do much to get better. So I think it's great that we have a nice and good group here, and some excellent players. So I'll send out some emails and see where everyone wants to be, and then we'll try to organize something starting next week or in a couple of weeks, whatever the gang wants to do. We do have one of our usual lurkers in the Discord, Graham.
What?
From the United Kingdom has popped in. So Graham was like, "Hey, your YouTube live stream is not working." I'm like, "I know." So he joined in here. So Graham, if you are there, if you have,
I am here.
Good. Do you have any questions or comments? I mean, you've been watching the live streams fairly regularly for the last, I don't know, has it been a whole year or more?
I don't think it's been quite a year. For one, I didn't know of the channel when it was my birthday last year, which was yesterday, so...
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. But I think the biggest thing is just how god-awful the terrain around Utitsa is. It is just god-awful. And seeing all that cavalry just go, we're going to go nowhere because we're stuck.
Yeah.
It hurt my soul.
Oh, it hurt me too. Don't worry.
It gave me immense pleasure. Someone had to see the upside to it there. So, well, cool. Did you have any questions or comments since you'd watched it? As far as the live streams go, were they entertaining, informative? What was your overall opinion?
They were definitely informative. For example, that little trap for the French artillery on their left of that hill, facing the Great Redoubt, that was very informative. Where they put their artillery on that hill facing the Great Redoubt, and the Great Redoubt and several other positions then crossfire them.
That's a very standard opening in the Moscowa game. Like that hill is such an inviting place to roll up Eugene's artillery, and actually it can be overwhelmed once you know that's going to happen, which it almost always does. If you pre-position the Russian position batteries, you can nuke it back with more firepower than it can handle.
Yeah, it's a poison chalice.
Oh, that's a good analogy, yes.
If you're going to use it, don't use it at the start. Use it when those guns have other things to do. So if you're taking if the French are doing a left hook, for example, some of their guns will be too busy trying to fight off the left hook and not paying attention to that hill, which is when you can put the artillery there.
Counter battery in general, counter battery combat is not very often used in the La Bataille games, but at the Borodino game, because there's so much of it, counter battery actually is a fairly major part, usually of the early stages of the Borodino game.
Yeah, because you want to thin out the guns before you go anywhere.
Cool. Well, thank you
I would
for
say that
sharing that. Yeah.
this is a game that absolutely tests one's patience to not, because the tendency for me is to go off of, hey, you got 2/3 of the components. You've got like cavalry and infantry, or you got guns and infantry. But it really pays off to have all three factors working together to launch a good attack.
Yeah. No,
There were so many times, like I said, Brennan had to hold me back because I was like, well, I want to go. Let's go. Because he's going to go. He's going to get on me, and I don't want him getting on me.
Yeah.
And so I learned a little bit about the value of sort of the potential energy of keeping the guard in Borodino village. It was like, well, it kind of forced the Italians over there to be wary, right? Were they going to attack me, or was I going to attack them? But it definitely tied them up from sort of supporting the action against Brennan, I felt.
Yeah, no, that's true. And sometimes just the threat of something is enough to get the other guy to to either overreact or to pin a force, just so that he's got it there to counteract. Good point. So before we wrap things up here, at least with the live stream, or the what will be a live stream at some point in time, anything else you guys want to share before we sign off?
Well, I just wanted to say this was like a year and 4-month endeavor or something like that. And I was amazed at all the dedication of everybody to show up Monday night and do this. And we didn't miss a lot of Mondays out of that time. This thing went on for a long time, and it was a great group, and I loved playing with y'all.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing, is that we all had a lot of fun. We had lots of laughs, and I think that's a big part of it. It's not just the game; it's the camaraderie. So, well, cool. Anything else? Any parting words before we turn off the recording?
Vaso random roller for the win.
All right. I think that is probably the best way for us to end the recording. So thank you, gentlemen, for tuning in and for playing and for sharing your thoughts on what's been a very fun game. And I'm looking forward to us carrying on here on Mondays, and we'll see what new game we can sort out. And that's about it. And for everyone who's been watching, thank you. I'm sorry the live stream wasn't working. If you have questions or comments, post them in the comment section, and I'm going to do my best to answer those for you. And if any of these guys are reading the comments, they'll try to do their part as well. But until our next live stream, next episode, everybody be well.